Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of congregational humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome. Hello and welcome to Sunday, December 26th, 2021. And I am David Breeden, welcoming you to our special day after Christmas assembly, in which the staff and our faithful volunteers are taking the day off. And I'm going to do it solo today, although we have had some help behind the scenes. So thanks so much to everybody who has helped out today so that everybody else can have a little time off. Also, I do want to welcome some visitors. We have a couple of different congregations joining us today because their buildings are closed and they aren't having any sort of assembly today. Also, I do need to remind you that our building is closed due to the new COVID variant, and it will also be closed on January the 2nd, Sunday, January 2nd, although we are hoping to open back up again on Sunday, January the 9th. Stay tuned for that, and we will see what happens next with this quickly changing scene, shall we say. Well, I would like to start out today with a little bit of a reading from Anne Truitt, 1921 to 2004, an American sculptor. You may not recognize her name, but you will recognize her work. For example, this is about as simple as it gets, isn't it? But it says what it is. It is the shape, the color. You've seen that before somewhere, even though you probably can't place it. I couldn't. Here's some more of her work, and this becomes a little bit more known if you've gone to some art museums. As a matter of fact, there's some more. We even have some of her work in the Walker Art Museum across the street from First Unitarian Society. An extreme minimalist, as you can see, but she's also a very interesting aesthetic and philosophical thinker. I want to read for our reading a little bit from her work. She kept notebooks, journals, etc., published some in her lifetime, and they've gotten quite a bit of notice since her death. She wrote this: "Unless we are very, very careful, we doom each other by holding on to images of one another based on preconceptions that are in turn based on indifference to what is other than ourselves. This indifference can be, in its extreme, a form of murder and seems to me a rather common phenomenon. We claim autonomy for ourselves and forget that in so doing, we can fall into the tyranny of defining other people as we would like them to be. By focusing on what we choose to acknowledge in them, we impose an insidious control on them. I notice that I have to pay careful attention in order to listen to others with an openness that allows them to be as they are or as they think themselves to be. The shutters of my mind habitually flip open and click shut, and these little snaps form into patterns I arrange for myself. The opposite of this inattention is love, is the honoring of others in a way that grants them the grace of their own autonomy and allows mutual discovery. A very interesting reading from a great visual artist, minimalist, Anne Truitt. Now, I've got a special little surprise for us today. We're going to be watching and hearing some music, and in there, we're going to be hearing from our interim music director. So That's one way to calm down after a busy holiday weekend. Thanks so much to Champagne Confetti. That's featuring Abby Wolf on vocals, and our new music director, interim music director Ted Olson on the bass. Also, if you were watching closely, you saw Jacob Mullis on uh, backup vocals there, our erstwhile AV guy. Thanks so much, everybody, for doing that and sharing that music with us. I want to consider minimalism and Anne Truitt today and kind of the way that she works through some things. But also, this is a question box talk today. I threw it open and asked for, hey, send me something. And I think one of the more interesting ones, and maybe what I want to focus on today, is what is wrong with America? Now, yeah, I think, that in one way, that's a very tongue in cheek thing to say. What's wrong with America? Everything's wrong with America today. But also, I think it's very important for us as people who try to be aware of how we act in the world and our actions, and what is a moral, ethical decision, what is not, to think through this a little more than maybe we sometimes do, to focus on how we live in the world and reflect back into the lives of others. And that's what I was kind of thinking about with this great Anne Truitt quote. Now, I want to share a Pew Research study that just came out. It says this: more than half of US Christians say most things in society can be clearly divided into good and evil. And this is the percentage of US adults who say these things. So 48% of all US adults say that things can be divided into good and evil, right? And 50% say they're too complicated to be divided into good and evil. Now, notice the breakdown of the different religious persuasions here. All Christians report that 54% of all Christians say that most things in society can be pretty clearly divided into good and evil. And 44% of all Christians say that those things are all too complicated to be divided into good and evil. Now, you look on down the list here, 64% of white evangelicals think that things can be divided into good and evil. And so you see how that's beginning to be skewed a little bit by a religious and, dare we say, also political persuasion about the difference between good and evil and the question of complicated kinds of questions. The religiously unaffiliated, however, say only 37% of them say that things can be divided into pretty clear divides between good and evil. 62% say, no, it's too complicated. And among atheists, as you might expect, only 22% say that things can be divided easily into good and evil. And about 78% say, nope, the problems in America today are very, very complicated, and we really can't start throwing black and white thinking, good and evil thinking into how those things are working. This is what I want to focus on because I have a suspicion most Unitarian Universalists are in agreement with the religiously unaffiliated and the atheists among us who think that no, good and evil probably isn't the real dividing line. It probably has something to do with our whole matrix of complicated things that have been happening. Now, one of the very interesting ideas that Anne Truitt, the minimalist painter and sculptor that I was talking about, one of her very interesting ideas is what she calls the co-constitution of reality. And that's what she's talking about in that reading this morning, the co-constitution of reality. Now, for us who don't really think things are easily good and evil, you see how this is going to affect us. We have roughly half of our American Christian friends who are saying the reality that we see is divided between good and evil. we who are co-constituents of that are saying, no, wait a minute, things are way too complicated to say that about them. So I think we're going to have a little bit of difference in how we see things. As Anne Truitt said, by focusing on what we choose to acknowledge in them, we impose an insidious control on them. And that's really the point I want to make about what's wrong with America is that, well, one of the things that we're not agreeing on is how reality itself is constituted. And we are, though, very, how to say, responsible for how others are constituting reality. I think Truitt is right about that. Our reality, the way it exists for us, really is created by not just our own minds. Um, uh, Merleau-Ponty, the French existentialist, phenomenological philosopher, that's one of the things that he has talked about a whole lot over time. He survived the Second World War, and Truitt survived the Second World War. And I think there's one of the wisdoms that is coming to us from that generation is that when things are really divided, when things really get broken down into right versus left, conservative versus liberal, fascist versus democracy, we have some real problems in how we constitute reality. And that's why this generation, I think a lot about that. As a matter of fact, they understood what's known as phenomenology in continental philosophy, the idea that we do co-constitute reality. There is no reality other than that which we are creating every moment of every day. She says this at the end of that little quote: love is the honoring of others in a way that grants them the grace of their own autonomy and allows mutual discovery. Love is the honoring of others in a way that grants them the grace of their own autonomy and allows mutual discovery. And that, I think, is a great, wise idea that, yeah, we don't see things as good as and evil a lot of the times, but, a lot of people do. And if we can accept how they are constructing their reality, then we are some ways down the road toward accepting them as people who have valid ideas and are helping us, as Anne Truitt would say, actually helping us create reality. Instead of, no, we just want to reject them and say, no, 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 no. I mean, that's easy to see, I think, in the current pandemic. We, of the persuasion of thinking things are complicated and science gives us a lot of the good answers, we had one way of seeing our way through the pandemic. Others, people who see the world as divided into good and evil, had a different way of seeing the reality of the pandemic. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us blame the other side for continuing the pandemic by not getting vaccinated and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, it is difficult in some ways to say, oh, whatever you think is just okay. But Anne Truitt isn't really saying that. She does believe there is a good and a bad way to act. It's not that. It is that we must understand how other people are going to be seeing reality and uh, and then co-constitute with them in such a way that we can say, all right, co-creators, we don't really agree with you on that, but maybe maybe we'll kind of work with you on it because yeah, it's complicated. It's not easy. And so we need to think this through a little bit. Now, so the wisdom of Anne Truitt in our reading today, but I think also wisdom very much for how we can continue to co-constitute reality. That's one of the problems with America, wouldn't you agree, is we're seeing it very, very differently, especially with, yeah, the pandemic. But there are all kinds of ways that we co-create reality. What will riding on public transportation be like? We don't create that. We may say, oh my gosh, it's always terrible. Not necessarily. We can co-create the reality rather than just accepting some kind of reality that maybe we don't like. So the way that we go into it is the way that we will experience it. As you know, many of you know, I'm very into the idea of the ancient Greek and Roman Stoics. There are a lot of neo-Stoics out there today, and that's always their point. And the first thing they're going to say is that not the co-constitution of reality, but the idea that the stories we tell ourselves about something is how that's going to work out or how we're going to feel. And so we have, as they saw it, a stimulus and a response, but you don't have to respond to that stimulus the same way every time. You have freedom in between those two in which you can choose to rewrite the story. The most famous example of that is the metaphor of the empty boat. Say you're going down the river one evening, rowing away, and you see a boat coming from the other direction. Well, say you're going upstream, and we've got a boat coming downstream. Now, that boat is headed right for you in this metaphor, and it's getting closer and closer. What are you going to do? Is stop, move. I'm over here. Get out of my way, right? Now, let's assume that someone is in that boat, steering that boat, and by golly, they knock against you and go on down the river. You're going to be angry at that person. Probably. You're going to blame them because they made a choice not to notice you. The empty boat metaphor, however, says, wait a minute, that's a story you have told yourself. You don't know why that person made that decision. It's better to assume that the boat is empty. Think about the difference in your reaction if the boat is empty. There's no one guiding it. It's no one's fault. It just happened. And so you say, wow, that's too bad, but it just happened. Also, so it's the stories we tell. Also, it is, there's a famous other metaphor, not quite as old as this one, but think about you're running through a field of beautiful grassy green field one day. Off you're running, and suddenly someone runs up behind you and tackles you. All right? Well, you can have the story, wow, what is that crazy nut doing and why did that happen? And that's one way of framing that reality, and it may be the true one. But also think about, you can be in other contexts. What if you're playing football? Well, in that case, instead of being completely angry that this person tackled you, maybe you just gained 8 yards, in which case you can say, wow, and you might even be jumping up and down when you get up because you're so happy that you gained those 8 yards. So you see the difference. It's all in the framing of the way we see these things. Now, take that back to what's wrong with America, and maybe it is how we are narrating the story. Maybe the Stoics have something to say to us there. We have the stimulus, what's wrong with America, how it doesn't go as we wish it to go, how no one is worried about climate change or the wrong side is this or that. That's the stimulus. And the response can be, oh, everything is terrible, what jerks they all are, whatever will we do, depression, sadness, etc. Or we can exercise our freedom and say with Ann Truitt, wait a minute, we are co-constituting reality. We are co-constituting reality. We are all creating it from different stories, but maybe we need to change our own story. Now, if you stop and think about it a moment, that's probably what democracy is supposed to be about, isn't it? Because we have the stimulus, we have the reality, pandemic, climate change, whatever is out there, and we have the response. Our response may be, oh no, stop carbon emissions, or oh no, everyone needs to get vaccinated. Well, okay, that's fine, but we have to remember this middle where we are co-constituting, co-creating reality. In which case, we have to pull back a little bit and say, wait a minute, how can we compromise with this other side? Now, I know what you're going to say because I say it too. They're so unreasonable. How can we even begin to talk about that? Well, one thing I think is the Pew Trust research. We have to realize, those of us who do see the world in a complicated way, and that there are so many factors playing out, that many of our fellow Americans see reality itself as constituting good and evil, that there are bad things that happen, there are good things that happen. God makes the good things happen. Uh, People in their sinfulness make the evil things happen. I know that's a broad brush for Christianity, but you get the point. Those two are going to be at loggerheads if we don't say, just for a moment, let's co-create reality. I can't do it all the time either. I'm just as tempted as everybody else to throw my shoe at the television, to doom scroll through the Washington Post and the New York Times and the New Yorker. I get it. It's not easy to co-create and accept that other people have other ways of seeing things. But I would suggest that all of us would do better, maybe be a little more stoic about it, if we thought about it a little bit different way. The Stoics, remember, really, it's just a cliche to say they didn't care about any kinds of emotions, or they didn't feel pain and that kind of stuff. That stiff upper lip, that's not true of the Stoics. They lived in bad times too. Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor, Stoic philosopher, died in a plague. So they knew reality as well. But what they did also know is that they were creating the narrative of the story. Yeah, you're going to die. That's a given. How you're going to die and what your attitude about that is something else, maybe entirely. It's not that they denied the reality of pain, but just as the Buddhists don't deny the reality of actual pain, what they're trying to do, both of the groups, is remove what they call suffering. That is, those stories that we tell ourselves that make us miserable. All right. Well, thanks a lot. I think that was a great question. I hope those who I didn't answer your questions, I hope you're not disappointed. We'll get to them another time, and as we co-create reality together. Thanks so much to the folks who joined us today from the various congregations. Have a really, really enjoyable week as we head into 2022. And instead of telling ourselves a story about how bad it's going to be, maybe we would do better to tell ourselves a story about how sharing and caring in a co-created America is really the best place to be. Thanks so much for joining me today, and have a great holiday season.